She, let's call her Jennifer, thought it would be just another evening. But it all started with innocent flirting. Stay with me, because this is a story about how the most ordinary words and gestures can turn into a secret that no one should ever know. I came home later than usual, tired after class. The light was on in the kitchen, and he, let's call him Michael, was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, calm and focused, as if he were waiting for me. His gaze lingered a little longer than it should have, and I felt everything tense up inside. Running late again? His voice was soft, but there was a note in it that sent a shiver down my spine. Studying, I replied and shrugged, pretending it was a normal conversation. He smiled with the corner of his lips and tilted his head slightly. You work so hard. But you should rest sometimes. I lowered my eyes, hiding a smile. It was concern, but I felt something more in it, something that I was afraid to name myself. His gaze caught mine again, and for a second time stood still. There were no words or movements between us, just a light, tense silence in which the flirting was born. I felt his gaze literally slide over me, and I felt a heat rise inside. I walked past him to grab a glass from the shelf, but he stood up right behind me, too close, so I could feel the warmth of his shoulder. His hand brushed against my palm as he handed me the glass, and the movement was so mundane, yet the touch took my breath away. I tried to move away, but he leaned in slightly and said quietly, "You have no idea how you changed the atmosphere in this house with just your presence." His words hung in the air, and I caught myself smiling, even though my heart was beating faster than usual. I took a sip of water, trying to hide my embarrassment, but his eyes wouldn't let me go. And in that silence between us, the most explicit flirting was already taking place. I put the glass on the table and felt his hand slide lightly across the back of my chair, as if by accident, but in reality, it was too deliberate. I turned around and our eyes met again. There was something in his gaze that made my knees tremble. He sat down opposite me but leaned forward, closing the distance, and said with a slight smile, "You're growing up before my very eyes. Sometimes I even forget that I'm supposed to see you only as the child of this family." His words hit deeper than he might have expected, and I felt my cheeks flush with warmth. I looked down, but a smile was hiding in the corners of my lips, and he noticed it, and his gaze became even more insistent. I felt the tension grow, as if the air in the room had become thicker. He leaned back slightly, but his gaze continued to hold me, not letting me hide. I picked up a spoon to occupy my hands with something, but he gently touched my fingers, stopping the movement. His touch was light, but there was a firmness in it, and it stripped me of any chance to pretend that everything was the same between us. "You're getting too shy," he said quietly, and the corners of his lips twitched into a barely noticeable smirk. I looked up and our eyes met again. In that moment, the world seemed to disappear. In his eyes there was neither strictness nor prohibitions, only interest and a hidden game that we had both already gotten into. I felt myself responding with the same spark, without even saying a word. I moved my hand away slightly, but he deliberately held the touch, letting me feel his warmth. My chest tightened and I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor. He wasn't in a hurry. His movements were calm, but in that unhurriedness there was more flirting than in direct words. He slowly took his hand away, but leaned closer so that I could feel his breath on my cheek. "You have no idea how interesting you are to watch," he said quietly, almost in a whisper. I froze, my heart beating faster, and unable to resist, I looked him straight in the eyes. There was no game, no coincidence, only an intention that left me speechless. I smiled slightly, unable to hide my emotions, and that small gesture seemed to only add fuel to the fire that was already burning between us. He noticed my smile and raised an eyebrow slightly, as if checking if I was ready to play this quiet but dangerous game of flirting. His hand slid across the table again and stopped very close to mine, not touching, but creating a tension stronger than any touch. "That's it," he said quietly. His voice was low and soft. "That smile of yours makes me defenseless." I felt the heat rise to my cheeks and lowered my eyes, but he wouldn't let me look away. His finger barely touched my chin, forcing me to lift my head again. Our eyes met, and in that moment, a silence filled with nothing but the beating of my heart hung in the room. He didn't rush to move away. On the contrary, he stayed too close, and every moment next to him felt like an admission that we were both afraid to say aloud. I froze, feeling his finger on my chin, and it was as if I lost the ability to breathe. He held me in that gaze so confidently that I couldn't look away, even though every cell of my body was telling me it was too close, too dangerous. But that was what was most attractive. His voice was almost a whisper, low and warm. You have no idea how much I like this state, when you don't know what to say. The words burned, and I involuntarily smiled again, even though I tried to hold it back. He noticed it, and his lips also twitched into a slight smirk, but his gaze remained serious, heavy, as if he were only half joking. He slowly took his hand away but didn't move back. His knee touched mine under the table. Was it by accident? I couldn't believe it anymore. A shiver ran down my skin from that barely noticeable movement, and I realized our flirting was no longer a game. It was becoming something more, something that was impossible to stop. I felt his knee next to mine and couldn't hold back a slight gasp. He caught it and leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between us. His eyes were glued to my face, and that look turned my insides upside down. "You're blushing," he said quietly, and his voice held a mix of mockery and admiration. I bit my lip, trying to hide my excitement, but he caught even that movement. His palm slid across the table and gently covered my hand, this time with no hint of accident. The warmth of his skin penetrated me instantly, and I couldn't pull my hand away. I looked up and we froze in that silent contact. Everything around us in the room seemed to disappear. No sounds, no time, just him and me. His fingers tightened their grip on my palm, and that soft gesture was more eloquent than any words. He held my hand so confidently that I didn't even think about taking it back. His fingers slowly slid across my palm, as if checking if I would allow him more. And I allowed it, just sitting there, not looking away, feeling my heart beat faster with every second. "That's it," he said quietly, and his voice had a warm mockery in it. "You've finally stopped hiding." I smiled involuntarily, but inside, everything was burning with tension. His thumb gently stroked my fingers, and that simple movement made me hold my breath. He was sitting so close that I felt his warmth so clearly that it seemed in just a little while, the distance between us would disappear completely. I knew we were playing with fire, but that very feeling made the moment even more intense. A silence full of hidden passion hung between us, and I knew we had almost crossed the line. He leaned in a little closer, and the distance between our faces became so small that I could feel his breath on my skin. His hand continued to hold mine, not letting it slip away. And in that soft but firm touch, I felt a power that I was already submitting to. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for this moment," he said quietly, and his voice enveloped me just like his presence. I gave a barely noticeable shiver at those words, and my smile wavered, turning into an admission without words. He caught it and slowly tilted his head even closer. Our foreheads almost touched. I felt the world around me disappear. The kitchen, the house, everything became unimportant. All that remained was this tension between us, where every glance, every movement was louder than any words. And I already knew that if he decided to close the last few inches, I wouldn't stop him. His forehead gently touched mine, and I closed my eyes because I couldn't bear the tension any longer. His breath mingled with mine, hot and slow, and it seemed as if even the air around us had become thicker. His fingers squeezed my hand tighter, as if sealing what had already happened between us. He wasn't in a hurry, leaving me in this state of anticipation that was driving me crazy. Every second stretched on forever, and my heart was beating so loudly that I was sure he could hear its rhythm. "Do you feel this?" His voice was low, right next to my ear, and the words seemed to burn from within. I didn't answer, just leaned into his shoulder a little more, and with that gesture I said more than I could have with words. He caught my silent admission, and his palm carefully touched my cheek, stroking my skin so softly that I involuntarily trembled. In that moment everything became clear. We had long stopped playing, and the road back was already closed for us. His fingers lingered on my cheek, and from that touch, I felt myself melt, forgetting where I was. He held my face so gently, as if afraid to scare me away, but there was no doubt in his eyes. He already knew I wouldn't back down. His breath slid across my skin, warm and enveloping, and I felt every cell of my body respond to his closeness. I tried to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat, and instead my lips trembled into a barely noticeable smile. He saw it and slowly ran his thumb over my lips, lingering for a moment. This simple gesture was more powerful than any confession. I couldn't hide my desire to stay close anymore. I caught his gaze and time seemed to stop. The room was completely silent, and only our hearts were beating in unison. His hand was still holding mine, and I understood he was already closer than anyone had ever been. His lips finally touched mine. At first it was cautious, as if he was giving me a chance to pull away, but I just squeezed his hand tighter, showing him that I wasn't going to. The kiss deepened slowly, confidently, and there was no rush or doubt in it, only that hidden passion that had long lived between us. His palm on my cheek became warmer, stronger. His fingers slid to the back of my neck, holding me closer, and I felt a shiver run through my entire body. He was breathing heavily. His breath mixed with mine, and every new moment became a wordless confession. I pressed myself closer to him, no longer thinking about prohibitions or what would happen next. In that moment, there were only the two of us. Our hands, our gazes, and this fire that was impossible to hide any longer. He didn't rush to let me go. On the contrary, the kiss became deeper, and with every second, I felt his confidence and power over the situation even more. His hand, firmly resting on the back of my neck, seemed to give me no chance to pull away, but I didn't need one. I was drawn to him myself, responding with the same heat. The world around us disappeared, dissolved in that moment. Only his breath, his warmth, and the tension that was growing between us, becoming almost unbearable. He pulled away slightly, lingering near my face, and his eyes sparkling in the dim light. "You know everything has changed now, right?" he whispered, but there was no doubt in his voice. It was a statement. I just nodded because words were unnecessary. Everything had already happened, and I knew we had crossed the line, after which only our secret begins. He no longer waited for an answer. His lips covered mine again, and I drowned in that kiss, forgetting about everything else in the world. His palm confidently held the back of my neck. The other one was tightly wrapped around my waist, not leaving the slightest chance to pull away. And I had no desire to. I felt only his warmth, his strength, his scent, and every second together turned into a confession that we were afraid to say out loud. He pressed me to him so closely that I could hear his heart beating, and it matched mine, wild and uncontrollable. His breath burned my skin, and every movement became more and more insistent. At that moment, I understood he was no longer going to hold back. And I didn't want him to either. We were too close, too engrossed, and the boundaries that once seemed insurmountable had completely dissolved. He pulled me even closer, and our lips merged in a kiss that was no longer a game or an accident. It was a confession without words. His hands held me as if I belonged to him entirely, and I didn't resist. On the contrary, I responded with the same heat. His breath mixed with mine, becoming more and more interrupted, and every moment seemed endless. He pulled away for just a second. His forehead touched mine, and his voice sounded low, almost hoarse. "Now you are mine forever." Those words passed through me like fire, and I realized that everything that had been before no longer mattered. Only this connection remained between us, a secret that made us closer than ever.